I think the importance of business culture emphasizes that people should not go into business to make money. They should go into business to serve the needs and wants of people, and if they do that well, they will ultimately make money. And I think that is the key. And if you can then create a culture that focuses on people and service and puts people before profits and service before reward, then I think you have a chance of success. I went to a Jewish school, King David, and I learned there that we, the Jews, were the chosen people of God, and that sort of tends to lead to somewhat of a superiority attitude. And although you're young and naive, you just think that, you carry on living your life like that and you don't pay too much attention to it. But then after school, I went into the Army, or the Air Force, in fact, and there I met another group of people, because I'd never met any other people outside of the Jewish fraternity, and I met another group of people that were white, Afrikaans-speaking males. And I thought that I was pretty special coming out of that environment, and I can tell you for sure that they didn't think so. They actually called me all kinds of names, which I don't want to repeat on this program. And I realized that they were then telling me that they were the chosen people of God. And that was quite a dilemma for a 17-year-old young boy, to have to go through and to ask some tough questions like, who's doing the choosing here? And why is he so confused? And I learned a very powerful lesson at that early age of my life, that there is no such thing as a superior group or one that is better than another. We're all just different, and the sooner that we learn to respect and tolerate our differences, the better off our country would be. So after the Air Force, I successfully dropped out of university, went to work in the music business, and then my older brother comes back from America one day and he says he's seen this fantastic retail department store in the States called Kmart, and that we should open a Kmart in South Africa and aim it at the black market. And I really knew very little about that, and I said, well, that's great, and who's going to run it? And he said, well, you are, I was 22 years old. I knew nothing about anything, quite frankly, at that point in time. So I said what most 22 naive boys would say. I said, sure, let's do this. And we went about starting to plan for the opening of Kmart, and it was scheduled to open in June 1976. As you all know, in 1976, or in the middle of June 1976, the Soweto uprisings took place, and we had to delay the opening of the store, and so we opened on the 1st of July in that year. And of course we were able to attract large numbers of people, but of course they were black. We had black customers, we had black staff, and I was about the only white guy around. I was a bit too young and a bit too white and a bit too naive to really understand how to manage people and how to communicate with them. So I found myself a kind of a mentor, I suppose you could call it. His name was Ralph Mamela. He was our supervisor, and I relied on him a lot to help us through this process of trying to manage and communicate with people, because I wasn't getting much respect from them whatsoever. I was just far too young for that. And then at the time there were these consumer boycotts that came along, and they were trying to promote a boycott of white-owned stores. And in the middle of all of this, one of our staff comes running back to us and tells us that Ralph Mamela was seen on the street corner handing out pamphlets to promote the consumer boycott of our own store effectively, which was really a shock to the system. I could not believe that someone could betray us like that. So I called him in, of course, and I really dumped on him, and I gave him everything I had to give. I didn't leave much out. And he just sat there quietly, and eventually, he said to me in a very stern voice, he said, I really appreciate what you've done for me here at Kmart. And I really appreciate all I've learned from you. But however, at the end of the day, when we go home, and I go home and I just get confronted with police harassment virtually every day of my life. I never know from one moment to the next if I'm going to be arrested for some or other apartheid law. And life is just intolerable outside of work. And if I have to make a choice, unfortunately, he said, Ian, it would always be freedom first and work second. And the light just went on for me. And I thought, wow, that was a serious eye-opener. For the first time, I realized that you just cannot ignore the socio-political environment in which people are living and just expect them to come and give their best at work and then have to go home and to face all those sort of horrific type of life events. So what I did, instead of firing him, which was my first reaction, I actually asked him to help me further. And he then started taking me into the townships, and I started to really learn and understand what it was like on the other side of the fence, as it were. And there again, I think a big issue in servant leadership was the understanding that I'm not going to be your boss and demand respect from you. From now on, I'm going to be your servant, and I'm going to respect you, and I'm going to find out from you what your life is like, rather than just expecting and demanding what I think you should be. So that was an important part of my journey, and one thing that really stuck with me for a long time. So after that, I moved into the music industry because I got an opportunity to deal with some exiled musicians, Kaifa Semenya and Leta Mbulu and Hugh Masekela, and that was a fascinating part of my life. And in 1985, I came back to Kmart, and then we continued some of the things that I had been doing in terms of servant leadership. One interesting example there of how we applied servant leadership in those days, we actually allowed the staff to choose their own manager, which was completely unheard of at that time. So we went to them and we said, okay, you guys can vote for the person you want to be your manager. And they all said immediately, and what happens if you don't like our choice? I said, no, we will live with your choice. We will live with your choice. And of course, they chose the most violent shop steward in the whole group. And we lived with the choice. And this guy, who was really completely anti-establishment, he became probably one of the best managers we ever had. And it was actually quite a win-win situation, because they couldn't believe that we would allow them to choose their own manager, and they really respected us for that. And from our perspective, they got somebody that they respected as their manager, and he worked out pretty well for all concerned. So that was one of the things. We also asked them if we could buy our own cars, because we said that it was quite tight in business and we wanted everyone to save money. And then my brother came along and said, listen, I need to buy a new car, And how can we buy a new car if we're telling everyone to save money? So we went and we put it to the vote. We said, okay, you guys can tell us if Rodney can buy a new car or not. And again, they were totally amazed by the whole thing and said, what happens if we say no? Well, then he'll just carry on with the old one. And again, they said overwhelmingly, sure, he can buy his car, no problem, it's all fine. And those were two examples that stand out for me in terms of how we practiced that stuff at Supermart. We became Supermart, by the way, because we had to change our name. We made a slight oopsie when we started Kmart. We just didn't think too much about trademarks. We just used the name Kmart, despite the fact that it was a massive worldwide brand. We thought, if it works for them, it should work for us as well. and then we made it even slightly worse because we used their logo as well. Nevertheless, 12 years on, they came to court with us, and they made us change our name to Supermart, and we carried on doing that. And then after that, in the early 90s, I actually felt to myself that there was an opportunity here. I had learned a lot about the South African political situation and how it was impacting in the workplace from our own experience at Supermart. And I thought, if I can go out there and help public companies to deal with the issues of racism in the workplace, that could well be something that will make a difference in our society. So I decided to go out and see if anyone would be interested in such a thing. And of course, at first, they just laughed at me. These big corporates, I managed to see a couple of HR guys, and they just said, what are your credentials? What's your academic background? And I had zero of any of those things. I had just worked in a company called Supermart that nobody had ever heard of. And eventually I decided, well, if I'm going to do something here, I'm going to have to actually make my way in, because no one's going to invite me in. And I came up with the idea of industrial theatre. And I wrote a play about racism in the workplace. I got a professional playwright to actually do the script, went to a company called Blue Moon Productions, and we produced our first industrial theatre play, and then we started to show that in companies. And that was my door in. People loved the play. It had a big impact on them. It was quite humorous, so it was done in a fairly palatable way, even though the messages were very, very powerful. And we started getting invited into these various companies, Murray & Roberts being the first one, and I was invited to work in a company called Wadle Engineering. I'd like to share with you one particular story in another Murray & Roberts subsidiary called Autocast. I was sent there to go and do some transformation work. This is in 1993. And I arrived there, and the MD is not looking forward to having me. This is in Brits, where some of the people are so far right, you have to send out a search party to find them. He says to me, I know that you're here, and I know why you're here, but I must tell you, I don't really want you here, because I don't think your plans are going to work in this company. So I said, why not? He said, well, let's see. So I walked around, he showed me the place, and there I noticed that they've still got separate canteens, white canteen, black canteen. They've got white toilets, black toilets. I couldn't believe it. So I said to the guy, look, I can't come and work here if you've got this kind of environment. So he said, well, that's what, it kind of is what it is, and it's not going to change, because if it is going to change, there's going to be so much drama here that nobody in the world will be able to manage it. So I said, well, then I better go back and tell Murray & Roberts that you're not interested in this program. And he said, no, you can't do that. So eventually he agreed to open the toilets, and he agreed to open the canteens. And he said to me, but when the trouble starts, and by this stage he was calling me Big Mouth from Joburg. He said, Big Mouth, when the trouble starts, you're going to come here and you're going to fix it, because I can promise you it's not going to be fun. I said, okay, well, that's why I'm here. Went back. 2 days later, I get the call. He says, right, you better come. There's big drama here. So I considered putting on my bulletproof vest. Anyway, I drove off to Brits. And when I arrived there, they were all toying outside. Hey, there's drama. Everybody's up and down. And I thought, well, I'm not quite sure if I was in the right place at the right time. And I thought, okay, well, let's see what happens. I get escorted in to the MD's office, and he says, you see what you've done. You see it? I told you this was going to happen. They've all down tools, and they're all jumping around the place. So I said, but where are the white people? I don't see any whites. He said, well, they've all gone home to pee. So I said, are you serious? He said, yeah. And they go home to have lunch and to use their toilets at home. They won't use them here. He said, I told you that you're in for some difficult stuff here. So I said, whoa. So he said, what are you going to do now, Big Mouth? So I said to him, well, look, the only thing I can think of is, let's get the shop stewards together, and let's get the supervisors, the white supervisors, all together in one room, and let's see if we can talk this through. I didn't know what else to do. So anyway, he managed to organize that, and a couple of hours later, we're sitting in this room, and I get introduced as the person who caused all the problems. And this is the first time I'd met anybody there. So I said, and what's the problem here, guys? And one of the supervisors says to me in Afrikaans, he says, look, I hear that this new South Africa is all about freedom of choice. So I said, yeah, sure. He said, well, we choose to go home. So I said, I'm not quite sure that's what we had in mind. He said, but I said, okay, well, if that's your choice, that's fine, but now please explain why. Why do you do that? And the guy started going on a tirade of abuse of African people that was beyond what anything I'd ever heard in my life. He just said, they are filthy, they are pigs, they can't eat, we can't stand next to them, they're dirty. And I was shocked, and I was looking at the shop stewards thinking, whoa, Someone's going to die here today, and I hope it's not me. Anyway, when he's finished, I turn to them, I say, would anyone like to respond? And there's silence there for a while, and then one guy stands up and he says, I'd like to respond. He says, I'd like to first ask the MD if he's comfortable with the productivity levels of this company. And the MD, who's now almost hiding behind me, says, no, it's actually the worst in the Murray and Roberts group. And the shop steward says, well, do you know why? And he says, well, if I knew why, I would certainly try and fix it. He says, well, I'm going to now teach you why. He says, you've just heard what these guys think about us and how they speak to us and how they disrespect us. How do you think we should react to that kind of thing? We have no way of doing that officially, so what do? We just sabotage. We sabotage your business, and we have been doing that every day for as long as I can remember, he says. Every opportunity we get, we'll stop the line, we'll break the equipment, we'll do whatever it takes to slow this business down and to show our utter contempt for the way in which we are being treated. And then he came with a sort of a coup de grace line, and he said, I just want them to know that if we are not fit enough human beings to eat with, we will never be fit enough human beings to work with. And that was, again, another really powerful line, and I realized that the impact of racism in the workplace was massive and was causing all kinds of problems way beyond the political issues. It was causing problems of low productivity, poor performance, and started to understand why South Africa is rated so low in terms of its overall productivity. And unfortunately, apartheid died, but some of the principles of management still live on today. And it wasn't just about management. In those days, it was about race as well, so it compounded things. These days, it's slightly different, but the boss principle, I am your boss, you must respect me, is still very much alive. And somebody who says that just doesn't understand what respect means. Because you cannot lead people if you demand their respect. You cannot lead people if you demand their trust. You can't go to somebody and say, like, well, from tomorrow, I want you to trust me. That's not going to work. So what we need to understand is that servant leadership is about creating a working environment in which people feel comfortable, they feel well treated, they feel dignified, they feel a sense of self-esteem, self-worth, and they go out there and they do their best because you have created the environment in which they can do that. I often get asked, how do you motivate so many people? And the question is, I really don't motivate anybody. And I don't think about motivating people at all. I believe that you have to create a working environment in which people motivate themselves because they feel part of something bigger, because they have bought into your vision as a leader. They feel inspired. They feel they're making a difference and they're contributing to the society in which they live rather than just working for a living. And that's what we've tried to do over the years in all the various companies, is to really go out there, find ways to show people that we respect them and that we want to support and encourage them, we want to train and develop them, and we want to create an environment in which they can go out and serve their customers to the very best of their ability. So at the end of 1997, I went out of Labour Link and back to Supermart to help my brother. It was growing too quickly, and we started to plan to sell the business ultimately, which we were able to do, fortunately, in 2002. We sold it to the Edcon Group, and they then rebranded it under the name Jetmart. And so 2004, I'm sitting idle for, I think, the first time that I had not worked for about 5 months. I was hanging around thinking of the next project. I was about 50 years old, and I realized that I need one more shot, one last attempt at creating something different. And just by way of a point, I always went into different industries. For some reason, I'm still not quite sure why, but each time I started a new business, I went into a completely unfamiliar industry. And in hindsight, I think one of the advantages of doing that, there are a lot of disadvantages. One of the advantages, you don't become contaminated by the conventional wisdom of that industry, because you just know nothing about it. You're not sort of swayed by the naysayers who tell you what can't be done. So I always tried to create my own map if I didn't have a map, and see if I could build a brand and at the same time perhaps rock the status quo a little bit of the industry. And that was always the challenge, and that's what stimulated me, and that's what I was thinking in 2004 when I wanted to start something new and give it one final fling in terms of building a new business and a new brand. And I was lying on the massage table having a massage, which I used to do regularly, a couple of times a month. And the beauty therapist who was doing the massage said to me, "Why don't you consider, the beauty industry?" And I just couldn't resonate with that. I thought, this is not a face for the beauty industry. I used to use soap, twice a week at that time. So I just couldn't see it. And then she kind of laughed and she said, but there's a gap in this business. There's a gap in the business. And I said, sure, but is there business in the gap? And I went out and did some investigations. I went to various beauty salons. I went to spas to find out what was going on. And then I realized that there was one sort of big gap in terms of a branded chain. There were no branded chains in South Africa of beauty salons. And I decided that that was perhaps worth the opportunity. And the first question that you always ask is, why? Why are there no branded chains? And I was ready to go and find out why. And I think I realized pretty quickly when we did start going into beauty salon business that the staffing was, without question, the biggest challenge that everybody faced, and probably the reason why no one had really tried to create something of a multi-unit chain of beauty salons. So I started buying up a couple of independent stores with the money that I had from the sale to Edcon. And in 2005, we eventually launched the brand Sorbet with 6 stores. The name Sorbet, people sometimes ask, how did that come? Well, it came with the help of a branding consultancy who asked us what kind of business we were looking at and what was our typical target market. And they came up with a whole list of names, and on that was Sorbet, and I just loved it. I loved the refreshing sound of it. I loved the concept of the ice cream, colorful and tantalizing, and I wanted to do something completely different. So we looked at it and we thought, well, what are the traditional beauty salons like? They're pretty quiet and serene and dark and dim, and we were going to do something a hell of a lot brighter. We were going to focus on retail, which is not the norm in the beauty industry. Most of the focus was on treatments, and we wanted to be a retail store that offered treatments rather than a beauty salon that sold products. Anyway, we launched the business, and I think in hindsight, some of the key principles again led me back to my learnings in servant leadership. And I wanted to create a culture. I realized that the biggest single downfall of most companies in South Africa is that they do not have a culture of people and service. They have a culture of making money. And when you're making money, you just don't always appreciate the nuances that revolve around service and people. So I thought I started doing induction training. And I sort of trained every single new staff member in the entire company. I still do that today. Every single new person that ever joins the business has to come through my induction training. And I asked them the simple question, what is the purpose of work? And that's always the first question I ask, and the answers are always pretty similar. To make money, to make a living, to gain experience, to do all these good things. And they're all wrong. They're all totally wrong, because that is not the purpose of work. The purpose of work is to serve people. And if you serve them well, then you'll make money and you'll make a living and you'll do all those good things. And we try and get people to change from being eye specialists, we call them eye specialists because they specialize in themselves, into what we call sorbet girls who are there to serve other people. And that is a huge paradigm shift that people have to deal with. And it took several years to instill that concept, because it's pretty foreign. Not only to staff, it's foreign to a lot of businesses as well. But slowly but surely, it started to filter through. In the dark days, we were losing staff hand over fist in the early days. A lot of people coming into our stores, but they were mainly staff instead of customers. And I think we had a very high staff turnover rate of about 40 to 45%, which was ridiculously high at the time. And then we started to change the way we managed the people. We gave them a higher remuneration package based on commission only, and we really started to focus heavily on the servant leadership process and helping people to feel good about themselves and explaining to them that it's not just the what and the how. We all know what we have to do in business, and we pretty much know how to do it, but we don't always know why. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose here? And the purpose in our industry is to help people to feel good about themselves. That's why they come. Women come into our salons because they want to leave feeling good. We don't actually sell treatments and products. We sell a feeling. We call it get that feeling. That feeling that a woman has just as she steps out of the salon and her nails are done and her hair looks cool and she's just great. And that feeling, that's the feeling we want to bottle and sell continuously. So we try and explain to our staff that that's what they have to do. That's their role. They're out there helping people to feel good about themselves. They're not just doing treatments and nail stuff. They are doing something constructive. They're making a difference in people's lives. They're touching people's lives in a positive way every single day. And that's not a job anymore. That's a privilege. How many people get to do that who can actually go home at the end of each day and say, I actually touched about 8 to 10 people's lives today in a positive. I made them feel good. I made them go home and enjoy the rest of their day. Isn't that cool? As opposed to, well, that was just another day of the same old stuff and I can't wait for my paycheck at the end of the month. And I think that's the shift in the paradigm that we've tried to create, and fortunately it's been relatively successful. It's never 100% right and there's always problems, but I think that has been, without doubt, the differentiator for Sorbet and a large part of the success of the brand. Is the way we serve our people and the way they serve their people. Our business is really called a community, and the citizens of Sorbet are our staff. They are part of our community. We don't call ourselves a company anymore. And we have guests, not clients or customers. I try to explain to our people that a client is someone that goes to a lawyer, not to a beauty salon. So we don't want to get involved with that. So we like to be in the hospitality industry, and that's why we call them guests. The thing about it is, if you ask somebody, who do you work for? If you're a businessman or a manager, the answer should be, I work for my staff. If you're an employee, the answer should be, I work for my customers. And in our case, for our guests. If you're not answering those, then you're on the wrong track. So servant leadership really is, and what we're trying to explain to our citizens, is it's about serving the people who are serving the people. And if you get that right, then your business will be successful. If they're not focused on how much commission they're going to make. When somebody walks into a beauty salon, our citizens will take a good look at her and think, well, she looks like she's got money, maybe I can sell her some stuff, and she's working in her mind how much commission she's going to be making. And if somebody else comes in looking a bit tatty and they say they just want an eyebrow wax for $50, maybe our citizens are not that keen on helping them. And we just say to each one of our citizens that it makes no difference how much money they bring. They are people. If you believe that you're just doing the same treatment over and over and again, and it's repetitive and it's the same old stuff, forget it. It's not. It's not the same. Because every single time, the person is different. You're touching someone else's life. So never think of it as a boring, repetitive job. And our citizens have slowly come to accept this concept. And obviously not all of them get it 100% right, but I think the feedback that we get from our guests and the continuous growth of the business and the fact that we have such a massive demand for franchising, about 40 franchise applications per week at the moment, and we've got 141 stores now, predominantly franchised. The demand and the growth of the brand has become substantial. It's becoming quite a significant brand in South Africa. So in terms of our service philosophy, we have a completely no-hassle return policy. And I think that's quite scary for some of our citizens and our franchisees. They always think that they're going to be abused and people are going to come back because we give a 100% guarantee that if you're not happy with your treatment, you don't have to pay. And we have a big sign in the store, not a little tiny thing at the back of our menu. It's big right up front there by the door. And people have taken a while to get used to that in terms of our internal side. The guests, of course, love it. We have a situation that if you come into the store and you want to return a product, okay, and you've had it for 6 months, and it's just got so much left, and you say, look, it's not working anymore. I'd like to give it back for a refund. Now, I think most other salons would simply say, footsack, forget about it. What am I going to do with this? 6 months, where's your slip? Why did you bring it back so late, etc., etc. But we'll take it back because we can't see why not. If you're going to give out a few R100 on a refund of a product and you're going to create that loyalty and you get them to sign up, we work out that the average loyalty member spends about 5,000 Rand a year, 5,000 Rand a year with us. And if you're giving back a couple of R100, over 5 years, that's 25,000 Rand that you're going to be getting back. So it's a very simple calculation. Spend 200 Rand, get back 25,000, as long as you can retain the loyalty and you can keep them happy and satisfied. So we'll take back anything. We'll take back something that wasn't even bought at us. It may have been bought somewhere else. It's the same product. We keep it short. Let it come. Sign the loyalty form, please, and may we look after you for the next 5 to 10 years. It just makes so much sense. So we have our own sort of a return policy that says, bring it back, no fuss. We still love you. You don't have to come with your ID or your unabridged birth certificate or your mother's marriage documents. Just bring it back. You might need the money for movies, or you just tired of the stuff, or your partner shouted at you because you spent too much money, or the packaging clashes with your bathroom, whatever it is. Bring back anything you like, especially your business. And that has been our policy, and it still is to this day. So we don't allow anybody to argue with a guest. I had an interesting experience the other day in one of our, I won't mention names, one of our department stores here in South Africa. My wife and I went back to return a pair of shoes, and we couldn't find where it was. Eventually we found customer services department. Went in there and we said, yeah, we'd like to. And we had the all-important life and death slip. You have got to have that slip. We had the slip and we had the shoes, and it was 1,200 Rand was the refund we requested. And everything was going fine, and then the guy says, I'm sorry, sir, there's a problem. And I'm very passionate about these type of things, so I'm now waiting to see what's going to happen. He says, the shoes were 1,200 Rand when you bought them, but unfortunately, there's been a markdown subsequently, and it's now only 800 Rand. And my system won't allow me to refund you more than 800. So I said, are you kidding? You know, are you serious? He said, yeah, no, I'm very serious. So I said to him, okay, I tell you what, why don't you get me a stepladder? And he looked at me curiously and he said, you know, well, why a stepladder? I said, well, I'm going to hold the stepladder while you climb up and take down the sign that says customer services, because it's not customer service, what you're talking about. And while you're busy doing that, I'm going to write another sign for you that says system problems. Because what you're telling me is that the system is more important than the customer. He says, unfortunately, it's company policies. And then that was the final straw for me. And I lost it. I said, right, who wrote the company policy? So the poor guy behind the counter, he says, I don't know, it's a very big company, so I have no idea who wrote the company policy. I said, well, I've got time, go and find him, or her. Because I want to meet the person who wrote the policy that says the system is more important than the customer. Because that person should be fired tomorrow morning. And ultimately, he did help me, the guy, because he gave me a gift card for the difference, which was to his credit. But I think it's that kind of stuff, you know, where you find company policies written that are aimed completely at satisfying the need of the administrators and the accountants in the business and have no bearing whatsoever on the needs of the customer. And I think that's what tends to happen, is that when you have a manager, you have an employee, and you have a customer, most of the time, the employee is trying to please the manager. And in so doing, they have turned their backs on the guests. And that's really where we have a problem. We said, turn around, we will then serve the people who are serving the people. And we'll give you everything you need to be able to go out there and serve to the very best of your ability. And I'm not going to make any demands. I'm not going to tell you what to do, how to do it, and I'm not going to reprimand you every time. In fact, what I'm going to try and do as a leader is to create what we call a place of safety. A place of safety is a working environment in which people feel free and comfortable to speak their minds without fear. And that's a very, very important thing. You need to have consistency of behavior. People need to know that they can come to you and you'll behave more or less the same each time, because if you're up one, down the next, you know, you're just not going to elicit any sort of approaches from your staff. They're going to walk in and ask the secretary, well, what kind of a mood is he in today? Should we come back tomorrow? That type of thing, you'll just never get the respect that you deserve. So, you know, it's not about me telling you what to do. It's not about me trying to blow out your candle to make mine brighter. I'd rather put them together and create more light. And I think that's a nice way to sum it up, is that we're out there trying to create something together. It's not about me or you or them. It's about us serving the people who are going out there to serve the people. And I think that is a way in which people start to feel that they're making a meaningful contribution to people's lives, and they can start to build a sense of self-worth and self-value.